So we're going to start off with a little bit of music, and this song's called This Little Light of Mine, and I'd love for you to sing along and clap along.
Nice.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. That's it. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now we're all gonna clap our hands, and we're gonna sing about clapping our hands. So I see many of you clapping, but not all. So hopefully you'll join in. Here we go. These little hands of mine, they're gonna clap in time. These little hands of mine, they're gonna clap in time. These little hands of mine, they're gonna clap in time. Clap in time, clap in time, clap in time. And this is a little bit of a short version, so we're gonna just finish up with This Little Light of Mine. We're gonna keep clapping our hands, so you can keep on clapping. I just faked you up there. So everybody, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. That's a big finish. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Yes, very nice, very nice. So why did we do that, right? So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about music and how music is connected to health and connected to different stages of life. And I actually am a music teacher and a performer for little children. I perform something called Kindy music, which stands for Independent Kids Music, not kidney music, but Kindy. And I want to talk a little bit about what's happening while we were just singing and clapping. And maybe this will work, but I'm not sure why my slides aren't responding. Maybe I need to do this. Okay, there we go. I'm not sure why my arrow's not working. So I'm just going to put up this whole slide. So when we're clapping, when we're singing, we're activating multiple parts of our brain. We're using movement, we're using language, we are using our senses, we're hearing, and this activates a really large portion of our brain. There's the sensory motor strip that goes all the way across your brain, and it involves multiple lobes of the brain. It's adjacent to our speech areas, and it's adjacent to a lot of different areas of the brain. So when we sing and use movement, we're activating our brains. And with little children, we want to do this because we want to kind of promote this. This helps for language development especially. And it's also when you're crossing the midline of your body, you're involving both hemispheres of your brain. So you're sending signals across the corpus callosum, which is this big bundle of nerves in the middle of your brain. And there's evidence that shows that this is connected to learning language in children. And so it's a very powerful educational tool. And then even as children get older and they've developed language, we can use song to teach facts. So we have the ABCs ingrained in our brains, forever etched in our memories. And we can use music to learn other kinds of facts. There's the 1550 United States song, you may know that from your childhood, that teaches all of the states in order, in alphabetical order. There's a continent song. There's something called Schoolhouse Rock, which you may be familiar with, which taught many, many different topics. And it's evolved. These days, there are people like me who are teaching all kinds of areas. And I am, as a former cognitive neuroscientist, I like to write and sing songs about science and how the world works. So I've got some songs that are promoting healthy habits and health and wellness issues. So one song came out of a conversation with Regina about hand washing and how with children, we have no issues with asking them to wash their hands. Are your hands clean? Did you wash your hands? But this is an issue in healthcare because it's considered rude to, or at least it was considered rude to ask a healthcare provider, did you wash your hands? Even if they're about to touch your wound or do something serious. So it was an issue that Regina brought up to me as something that we need a little more education about, and making it okay for you just to ask, did you wash your hands? And I think actually the tide is turning with that, at least as on the patient side. I've seen more signs, and you see more, the hand sanitizer is more ubiquitous in doctor's offices these days. I think that there's been more education on that issue. But anyway, from that conversation, I wrote a song called Nobody Likes Viruses and Germs, which I'll play tonight. And it promotes hand washing. But I've got a song about wearing your helmet when you ride your bike. I have a song about eating healthy, about eating your vegetables. And okay. So we, sorry, do I need to do something to make that not just that, or just keep working with my son? Okay. So we can educate on many different kinds of issues through song. And the exciting thing is there's a lot of research going on these days that is proving how useful music can be and proving the connection. So there's evidence that's proving the relationship between, for example, language and music. And there was a study from a researcher at Northwestern who was measuring biological, taking readings, and I believe they were measuring, taking EEG measurements. So they were measuring the electrical activity in the brain, and they found evidence between making a beat and speech sounds. So there was synchronization between different brain areas involved in producing speech and making a beat, keeping rhythm, which is very interesting because hearing of speech sounds and associating with letters is really critical for learning to read. So there's a connection there between making a beat, being able to keep a beat, and learning to read. So that's an interesting development, and I actually posted an article about that on my Facebook, and I have a friend who is dyslexic who said, that's an interesting connection for me. It's two sides of the same coin. I can't keep a beat, and I have dyslexia. So I'm not quite sure if that's an area, we're not going there, but that's a really interesting connection, right? So I'm not sure if that's an area that people have been studying. If they haven't been, they ought to be, and maybe that's a pathway towards developing a therapy, an early intervention, perhaps, towards helping with dyslexia, or if someone is having trouble with other interventions, that might be a way of syncing up those brain areas. If there's already hardware in there that's connecting those brain areas, maybe there's a way to utilize that. So let's see, skip this. I was going to tell you a little story when we were talking about what we were doing during that music section. So I'm going to go back to that story. That when you're teaching young children, you can see their wheels turning. You can see it happening when you're doing music and movement. It's a precursor to language development. And sometimes I work with children who are pre-verbal. And I was teaching a toddler music class with children who were, I think, around 18 months old, 18 months to 2. And part of the curriculum is to do rhymes. So the rhyme went something like this: watch out, the soup is hot. Stir it, stir it, stir it in the pot. And so repetition is a really important part of learning. So we tried it with one hand, we'll try it with the other hand. And what am I doing there? I'm crossing the midline of the body, where we can do that either with one hand or with either hand. You're using your body space and using repetition. I invite everybody to join in, and at first the children are there with their parents or caregivers, so the parents will join in, and that kind of gets their wheels turning. Oh, I'm supposed to be speaking along or singing along. But since they don't have that many words yet, they don't usually join in at first. So then the next class I brought it back, and we started to do the rhyme. Watch out, the soup is hot. Stir it, stir it, stir it in the pot. And I waited like that. And this one little girl who was sitting across the way did that. Pot. And she was so excited. She had this, like, she just realized she got it, and she was really proud of herself too. And then we were all, gave her that feedback of that, good job. And then the other children, it was, I don't remember if it was the same class, but as we were doing more rhymes during that course of that session, the other children had learned from watching her, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. And they all started to join in. So when I would ask them to join in, it wasn't just the parents, it was the kids joining in too. And this is during that little critical phase of language development. So it was very interesting to see that happening right in front of your face. And for the kids, it sort of sends them along a little bit faster, using music and movement, and which is why we have so many rhymes that we all know from our childhood. And which is why when you see children's artists or preschool teachers, they use a lot of movement. We're always wiggling fingers and waving hands and stomping our feet and clapping our hands. That's why there's really an important neurological basis for doing all of that. So now how does that connect to patients? All right, so let me see. I'm going to move past some of these slides here. And let's just talk a little bit about what skills we know we're teaching when we're doing all of those kind of activities. We're developing balance. We're developing motor control and coordination. Kinesthetic awareness, which is awareness of what your body is doing, and just general self-awareness. Fine and gross motor skills. So gross motor skills, clapping your hands and stomping your feet and moving big parts of your body. Fine motor skills, doing little finger plays or doing things with your fingers. Those are skills that develop during these kind of activities. And then social skills and emotional development. I told you the story about the other children learning from that one child, and that's all critical for language development. So some of these skills are the kinds of skills that sometimes are affected in certain kinds of illnesses. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other memory impairments, stroke recovery, autism spectrum disorder. A lot of those particular skills are involved. So music therapy is a area that has taken advantage of that of being able to build those skills. And there has been a body of research that's been developing with music therapy that shows these benefits and other physiological benefits as well. Improved respiration, lower blood pressure, improved heart output, cardiac output, reduced heart rate, relaxed muscle tension, all come along with music therapy. And then in addition, there are psychological benefits. And patients have reported they have a better experience with treatment, reduction of pain, reduction of anxiety. They have it affects their anesthesia choices and their amount of pain medication. So those are really important things to notice. And I just want to tell you a little bit about some of these interesting studies that I found. There was a study where they were looking at the effects of singing on certain neurological disorders, and they found that there was evidence that singing helped with speech deficits in stuttering, in Parkinson's disease, in acquired brain lesions, and autism. And that singing directly stimulates the muscles associated with respiration, with phonation, that means producing sounds, and articulation and resonance. So we can use music to help, because in addition to providing all of these benefits, music is motivating. Music is emotionally, has an emotional effect. And so it's a useful technique, and it can support traditional therapies. And we talked about how singing in particular can help with respiration. There was a piece that was floating around on the internet with this Phillips Breathless Choir. Did anybody see that? So it was, you can look it up on YouTube, and it was basically, in essence, it was a commercial for some kind of a device that they use as a portable oxygen device, but that was very subtle, because they were telling this story about this choir I think it was in New York, and they had 18 participants with severe respiratory issues, with serious respiratory issues. They ranged from cystic fibrosis, a collapsed lung, COPD, there was a 9/11 first responder, someone with a vocal hemorrhage, an autoimmune disease, a whole range of respiratory problems. And they show in this video how their beginnings and then where they went with it. And singing really motivated them to use their breath better, and they did this performance at the Apollo Theater that was amazing. So in addition to, and the 9/11 first responder, in particular, he said that he found himself singing in the shower and it hadn't happened in years. And how it not only was working their vocal muscles and working their respiratory pathways, it was also motivating. And they ended up doing this wonderful performance. And there are people who are studying choral music. So there was a Swedish study where they were measuring choral singing. And they found that the choir members had synced their heart rates while they were participating in singing, which is, it makes sense, right? Connected to you're all breathing together, but it was interesting to them how significant and how quickly their heart rates all coincided together. So, that's kind of an interesting finding. And we can also use choirs and choral music in other areas. So there's a chorus in New York called the Unforgettables Chorus. It's happening right now. They also have pieces online. And it's a chorus of dementia sufferers and their caregivers, and it's run by a physician at the New York Medical Center, NYU Medical Center. And the co-conductor was reporting in this video clip, which you can find online, that snapping and hand clapping just woke up the choir. It increased their interaction. So all of a sudden they're waking up physically, and then they're waking up socially. They're interacting with each other. And then the caregivers reported that not only did it lift their moods, but they also had a whole network of supporters. So it's providing this social benefit. 5 minutes, wow. Okay, and so this is something that maybe we can spread more widely. So there are dementia sufferers all over the place. I don't know if there are choirs like this in other places, but maybe this is something that we can bring back to our areas, to wherever we're from, or to share with other people. This is something that is a benefit to them, and I just will quickly talk about why. One of the areas that's affected last in Alzheimer's is the medial prefrontal cortex, which is in the center of the brain, and it links music, memories, and emotion. And they found that this is one of the areas that deteriorates last in Alzheimer's. So it's a pathway towards communication, and this may help. And just something else to look at later, there's a documentary called Live Inside that also works with this idea, and they bring in headphones to dementia sufferers. And these people who are some of them are nearly catatonic, and you put headphones on and play music for them, and all of a sudden they're animated, they open their eyes, they start moving their bodies, and this is a pathway towards communication which can aid caregivers and can help the patients to be able to be a little more interactive with their care. So I only have a few minutes, so maybe we'll share these slides later, because I'm very much longer talk, or I'm not as effective as I thought. But so music can be a wonderful outlet for emotions, and there is a lot of research out there that talks about some of the benefits of music, and I'm just gonna go past these real quick. But there's benefits for premature babies, benefits for the elderly, benefits at really every stage of life, and people have looked at Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia. I'll just share a very quick story that I have a musician friend in LA who works with a drummer who has a form of fibromyalgia and suffers from chronic pain almost constantly. But her experience is that while she's drumming, she doesn't experience that pain. Now, maybe this is also connected to what we were talking about earlier with beat making and connected to different areas of the brain, but whatever is going on there in the brain, it blocks out her pain temporarily while she's drumming. That's pretty amazing. So maybe that's something that, I'm not sure how widely that has been studied, but that's an interesting avenue for research, I think. Now I wanted to just talk about one other aspect of music connected to healthcare is that music, there's also several programs that are out there these days that are bringing music to patients in healthcare facilities. And I think one of the biggest ones is called Musicians on Call, and it's in 9 cities right now. They're expanding to 3 more cities this year. And they have volunteer musicians who come to the bedside. Has anybody worked with Musicians on Call? Any or know of them? You know of them? And the report of patients is sometimes this is like the best experience that they've had the entire time that they've been in a healthcare facility. So to be able to bring a little bit of joy and to be able to lift somebody's spirits can affect you physically. And like I said, that there's this body of research that's showing all of the areas that it's affecting your immune system, it's affecting your heart rate and your blood pressure, and it's affecting you. Okay, so these are organizations that maybe you'll be able to connect with if you work with patients, or if you're a caregiver, if you work with caregiver organizations to help. So Pickleberry Pie and Taffy are in this area. Taffy is also in California and Florida. Longy School of Music in Boston. They are actually they're trying to develop a program with their grad students to have all of the grad students do outreach in the Boston area. And then there's a musician I know in Boston called Alistair Mook who wrote a record with his daughter who was suffering from leukemia. And while she was going through leukemia, they wrote a record together called Singing Our Way Through about their experiences. And it's an amazing record, and he's giving it away free to institutions and patients. So if that's something that you could use, go to their website. He does performances in hospitals, clinics, and they want to share that. It has some really wonderful songs. And there's also an organization called the Songs of Love Foundation that volunteer musicians write songs, personalized songs for individual patients. And they've sent out, I'm not sure the number of songs, but many, many songs. So if that's something that you don't know about and that you could share with patients that you know, especially for children and teens, I think. So just wanted to say that music can really help patients in many, many ways, many stages of life, from prenatal and baby care to elderly to dementia to Parkinson's and autism and all of these diseases that we want to help and that affect so many different people. So thank you very much, and we'll sing more tonight.